Something we also just want to underscore, and we want to underscore, is just the tremendous loss of life that we are now beginning to see on a scale that has not been seen in many years, almost since like the Vietnam War level of losses, especially from a military standpoint. So let's go ahead and put this next one up there, which is that the official number that the Russian Ministry of Defense acknowledges is 498 Russian combat deaths with 1,500 injured. Now, that's probably on the lower end. There's no way to know. The Ukrainians are claiming some like 4,500 to 5,000. I would take that with a major
The latest
grain
I
of
saw
salt.
from them was 8,000.
Yeah, that just seems tremendously, tremendously high. That's double the amount of troops that we lost in the entire war in Iraq in like 20 years. So I would just be very skeptical of that number. That being said, they're acknowledging 500. Okay, well, that's a lot of troops in such a short period of time. I put it into perspective, put my tweet up there, which is I want to go ahead and pull the numbers. Russia has lost as many troops officially in 1 week that it took the United States 10 months of war in Iraq to arrive at 482 combat deaths on our side. Now, as Glenn Greenwald pointed out, we had a very, very different military strategy. We basically leveled the entire Iraqi cities and the military from shock and awe campaign, and that the Russians are pursuing a much more 20th century man first and lack of air power and all that. Second, regardless, 482 young kids blown to hell and killed. And that's just the official number.
Yeah.
Let's say it is 1,500. That's 1,500 parents who don't have kids anymore.
And it may not be popular to say, but I feel horrific for them.
No, you should. I mean, have you seen these videos coming out of these kids? They're like, we don't even know why we're here.
I mean, listen, those things are being put out by the Ukrainians, and they may be total propaganda.
Maybe.
But I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that they didn't think that this is what they were signing up for.
Did a 19-year-old Russian make the decision to invade Ukraine?
No, exactly. And so, this is also not the war that's been sold to the Russian public, which is part of why Putin is having some trouble at home. And again, it's impossible to say how widespread that is. They put out a new poll from like a Russian government-affiliated pollster that's like, actually, Putin's approval rating went up. Hard to say that that's the case, but who knows? There's certainly some dissent, very brave dissent in the streets right now that we should absolutely applaud. But yeah, it's a horrific loss of life. And it would not be surprising if the reports of very low morale from the Russian troops are true.
Yeah, I think it is true.
Because what were they told? They were told this is a peacekeeping mission. They were told, look, we're not the aggressors here. And then you go in and you're having to meet Ukrainians face to face. You're being given the orders to shell apartment buildings and things of this nature. It would not be at all shocking if those reports of low morale are in fact true. It's impossible to know exactly how many lives have been lost on either side of this conflict at this point. There was an independent estimate that projected about 1,500 lives lost for the Russians and about the same for the Ukrainians.
It makes about sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Again, and even this independent estimate said, like, we really can't know precisely, but that's what people who are trying to be objective about this are projecting. And again, for one more comparison, during our 20 years of war in Afghanistan, we lost 2,500 American troops. So if the independent estimates are at 1,500, we lost 2,500 total over 20 years, and that was a horrific and catastrophic loss of life, obviously. So, there are a lot of mothers who are losing their children right now on both sides of this conflict that should not be overlooked and who are not going to be happy about what's going on.
Right, and look, like you said, yeah, it's propaganda, but I have to believe. I mean, what I do believe is that regardless of circumstance, losing your child on both sides of this conflict is a horrific experience. And this is something I've been trying to point out in terms of domestic Russian support. Do not underestimate what it means. Whenever somebody loses their kid, they are liable to come out and actually speak out and say something. It happened here in America. Remember Code Pink? I mean, I forget what her name is. Cindy Sheehan?
Yes.
Right, Cindy Sheehan. She was a national figure in America, standing outside of the Waco, Texas ranch, being like, I'm not going to leave here until you come out and apologize to me because my son died in Iraq. She was all over the news. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Russia, but having read a little bit about the moms who lost Russian soldiers in Afghanistan and how they were treated terribly. The Soviet Union was not allowing them to hold official ceremonies and not allowing them to grieve in public because they didn't want to destroy morale. Those 15,000 soldiers who died, their parents made a big stink in Moscow and all throughout the country. And it had a significant impact. It was whispered amongst, oh, so-and-so just died in Afghanistan. So-and-so just died in Afghanistan. And look, I mean, and they've already come out and said, we're going to pay families, I think it's $100 a year, some sort of pension, which is nothing, you know, come on, to these people. But really, it goes to show you that when people start dying and when parents start losing their kids, if there is not a major buy-in from the population, that is going to have a domestic political effect, whether you like it or not, no matter how locked down your country's state media and all of that is. And whatever the number is, it's only been 8 days and it's going to rise. The civilian number, also, we have no idea. The United Nations right now says 227 civilians had been killed and 525 have been injured between February 24th and March 1st. They say that is very likely dramatically undercounts that, but that's what the UN says. Probably the best figure that's floating out there, so let's go with it because there's so much propaganda really on both sides about exactly which one it is, and even the UN is exactly the most trustworthy figure. So, you know, the bottom line, it's been a week, at least a couple hundred Russians are dead, at least, a couple hundred Ukrainians are dead, civilians, and then at least probably more than a couple hundred Ukrainian soldiers are dead, and that's just in the first week. So it really is just a total tragedy.
Yeah, it's horrific.
Especially when you put it in the scale, especially of probably what's to come, which is a brutal insurgency and a brutal takeover of a lot of these cities. I really feel for these people.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And you can also see that, you know, the Kremlin is taking a lot of aggressive actions within Russia to shut down any media that is at all independent, which also indicates a level of insecurity about how the population is feeling about this war and its impact on their own lives, and, you know, their sense that this was not, in fact, a sort of righteous defensive maneuver, which is what the Kremlin is trying to sell them on. That's one indication. Obviously, the people who continue to come out very bravely into the streets, facing arrest and persecution from authorities, is another indication that they did not do whatever they needed to do in order to be able to get the population fully on board. And again, it's impossible to know what the sort of breakdown is of public sentiment for and against this war. But I think judging from the external signs of people by the thousands being willing to come into the streets and the Russian authorities shutting down every semblance of independent media, that tells you they are not feeling like they have done a great job winning the propaganda war. And again, in terms of, I say this every day, but I think it's really important to remember as we're evaluating what is happening on the ground, the Russians also are not, because of the way they've tried to sell this war to their population, they're not really able to like tout their battleground wins, battlefield wins.
That's an important point.
The way that the Ukrainians are. So that also creates an asymmetric sort of information environment. So just keep that in mind. But even that being said, we now see this morning some significant Russian gains where some of the Ukrainian defenses are starting to fall.
Yeah, and we will go ahead and put this up there on the screen in terms of the reports of lower morale. It all fits. I mean, it would make a lot of sense. There are some videos actually coming out of Russian troops having to go into grocery stores in some of the cities that they conquered. All that just shows you is that if they're going and they're taking food, that means that they're probably not being well fed. You can also surmise, like I said, on the maintenance of a lot of this stuff, it's very demoralizing to have to lose equipment, abandon equipment, and even being taken prisoner, running out of fuel, all these things. It just shows you that the higher command and the brass have not thought really about your well-being and your welfare. So look, that could all change. Like we said, it's only been 8 days since this happened. That's extraordinarily early in the history of warfare. It's very likely this is going to drag on for years, 5 years or something like that. People don't want to hear that, and I'm not saying it's going to be a shooting war in all that time, but in terms of a settlement and in terms of when things get back to normal, they could never be. We don't know what that is. And insurgencies, it lasts a long time. I mean, the reason that number of 482 combat deaths, we didn't really have a full-blown insurgency in Iraq until 2 years in, since 2005. I mean, it can take a long time. So this is why I said at the beginning, never underestimate the follow-on and the 40th effects of war, and I think the Russians are going to find that out really the hard way in the years to come.
Yeah, as much as they are more committed to Ukraine than we are, the Ukrainians are more committed to Ukraine than the Russians are, and I think there were some dramatic miscalculations here going in.
Yeah, that's smart.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.